After 9 o'clock, welcome back to the second hour of the show today. Let me just remind you that this hour of news and views is sponsored by African Muslims Agency. African Muslims Agency, a beacon of hope to communities for over 35 years in Africa and beyond. And we now cross over to Germany, to Berlin. To be precise, we're going to be talking to someone from South Africa who is currently in Germany. And that, of course, is you, Ilham Rawoot. You are a freelance journalist and a researcher, and you there as an exchange student.
I'm
Tell
on
us
a
why you're there.
university fellowship, yes.
University fellowship. Are you enjoying it?
Not so much the political situation and weather situation in Germany, but it's nice to be able to travel and, see the world. So, yeah.
Absolutely. I think there's nothing better to open your mind than traveling, meeting other people, and just getting connected with what's happening elsewhere in the world. It does give you a big picture. Big picture thinking is what it's all about. You are here this morning to talk to us about an article you've written, very fascinating indeed. And the article, the headline reads as follows: 3 African countries are fueling Israel's war. You go on to say, together, Gabon, Nigeria, and the Republic of Congo are the largest supplier of crude oil to Israel. Critics warn that this may make them complicit in genocide. Sure, that is quite serious. And here we are. We've been knocking the other Arab states surrounding Palestine and Israel, saying that they're not lifting a finger to do anything, and we have these type of activities within our own continent.
Yeah, it's really a shame because, like South Africa, which is so powerful in the African Union, has still allowed for, these sales to take place. And I mean, South Africa itself, provides Israel with 15% of its coal. So Africa is not as, supportive of Palestine as it seems. And so the African Union, for example, has said very openly that it is against the genocide. The Nigerian president has said very openly that it's against the genocide. Gabon and what was the other country?
Congo,
Congo
DRC.
have, and very importantly, this is not the Democratic Republic of Congo. It's the
Okay.
which is different. They have not responded to any comment that I've spoken to, but that I've asked them. But also, they have not spoken out against Israel at all. So you have to remember that also Africa has been reliant on trade with Israel for a long time. And Africa is still, there's somebody that I spoke to for the article explained that Africa is still a victim of colonization. And for decades and decades, we were seen as the bottom of the hierarchy. We were seen as somewhere that you can exploit, that's somewhere where you can get resources and, not give anything back. And we're still in that place. So if you look at
let me ask you this question. Does it make it right or wrong? You've just indicated, and I nearly fell off my chair here, that South Africa supplies 15% of coal to Israel. And knowing that we were the first country that took Israel to the ICJ, and since very many other countries have come on board, whether anything's going to come of it is another matter. But be that as it may, does it, how do you weigh up what is right and what is wrong? And I want to quote, you quoted Naim Gina in your article as well. And this is what he says. And it really rings so very, very true. He says, unfortunately, as with many states around the world, most African states separate business from politics. And I think that there's a very, very good reason, whether we agree with it or not, but there is a reason for why they do that, because as you've indicated, we're still stuck in the yoke of colonialism. So he goes on to say they separate business from politics, diplomacy, morality, and ethics. And of course, that's the words of Naim Jina. He is a researcher at South Africa's Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection. How do we separate it, even though you and I, Naim, would agree and accept that this is the way, the dice rolls, knowing that we are a third world country, knowing that we are that dependent on foreign trade. It just, it boggles the mind, does it not? How are you looking at the situation?
So I feel like I might be sounding like I'm giving African governments too much of the benefit of the doubt. But one thing is that a lot of them are stuck in contracts with companies that were made many, many years ago that they can't get out of. And a coal company so for the article that I wrote most recently for the New Arab about South Africa exporting coal to Israel, we don't know which companies are actually doing that. And there are 15 companies that export coal from the Richards Bay coal terminal to the Haifa port, but we don't know which ones they are. And this 15% is actually from October last year, after the genocide started, till July this year. So till February this year. So, some of the biggest companies are Glencore, and then of course there's Sasol, then there's but again, we don't know exactly who they are, so we can't say that officially. But yeah, so there's the contracts, but also, we ultimately can't make decisions for what private companies do. And this is a shame, because we should, as a government, be able to say, actually, we need our policies and our actions to be the same. But unfortunately, that is not the way that it works. We don't just sell coal to Israel. We sell a lot. We sell meat. We sell chemicals. A lot of these chemicals could be used in making weapons. The coal is used for transport, which is also, fuel is needed to transport goods from, one part of Israel to Gaza. So it's very difficult to just assume that our policies and our actions are the same, because we have older contracts, and because the South African government actually has very little power, according to law, over private companies.
I hear what you say about private companies, and you are right. We're very contract bound. But at the same time, this would give leverage to Israel and their supporters like the UK and the US to say that we're being very hypocritical. We've taken the court to the ICJ, and yet we are obviously trading with Israel. Let me just read, there's a couple of messages here. How is Israel apartheid when there are Palestinian Arabs in the parliament and Palestinians in the universities and colleges, and Israel gives full rights, citizenship to Palestinians if they want? Can you explain? I'm not quite sure if that was what we were going to be talking about, and if you're prepared to answer that question. And the same person, Phelps, I think he calls himself Phelps fan for good. Anyway, he or she goes on to ask another question. Let me just get to that place. How is it apartheid when all the gates to Temple Mountains is for Muslims only, except for one gate? I don't quite understand that question, because I've just earlier on in a previous interview. A South African Muslim has just arrived back from Al-Aqsa, and she couldn't stop talking about the harassment by the Israeli soldiers, and very particularly the female soldiers. She says they're all glammed up, and they actually take delight in harassing the Muslim pilgrims from, I guess, around the world, particularly South Africa. And I think it ties in with the ICJ case and the fact that you're Muslim. So I hope that answers your question, Phelps. I
Can I
think,
just come in quickly? I don't
sure.
think it's a very productive discussion to be bringing up, this very pathetic crying about by Zionists about how difficult it is for Israel and how it's not apartheid. I'd like to get back to what we're actually talking about, but just as somebody who's been in Palestine several times, and also somebody who actually reads the news, having people in power positions, which is not really power positions, having people in parliament, having, citizens or Palestinians in the country does not make it not apartheid. It just makes people existing there. And also, Palestinians do not have the same rights as Israelis in Israel. So no, please get over that. There's also 2 million people under siege in Gaza. There are millions of people occupied by Israel. So you cannot separate the occupation, which is illegal under international law, from what happens in quote unquote 1948 Israel. So please get over yourself. It's not about you. There are 40,000 people dying. So no, being killed. So stop crying. So can we just move on to what we were talking about?
Yeah, and just before you get there, I kind of wonder, how do Zionists go to bed at night? How do they live with themselves, seeing the carnage and the genocide playing out, and also knowing that their forefathers, their grandparents, and great grandparents were victims of the Holocaust? So, what the Nazis perpetrated on the Jewish people, you'd think they'd be a more humane race. They'd be full of humanity and understanding, and not perpetrate the horrors that has been unseen globally since the Holocaust. So yes, let's move on. I do think Zionists need to get over themselves. I think Zionists at large, the world over, are murderers, outright murderers. And I ask myself, how do you sleep at night? How do you live with your conscience, knowing what your people are doing? But let's leave it there and let's move on to you, Ilham, and the article you've written. I've just vented, so over to you in the article.
So what do you want to know about the article?
Okay, so coming back to the three African countries, we spoke about contracts, obviously. Naim Jina does go on to say that it's very difficult to separate business from politics, and knowing that we are still under the yoke of the colonialists. Do you think there's a way of moving forward from this, or do we have to accept the status quo?
So firstly, we need to cancel sovereign debt so that we're not held hostage to, groups like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank for loans that were made ages ago. So sovereign debt
And
needs to be
sorry to
canceled.
interrupt you. That is a very big part of what we're talking about right now. A lot of these countries are hooked into sovereign debt, and that probably have no way out of it. They just have to continue trading with Israel and other such countries because they're indebted to them.
Yeah, so if a lot of so we're not indebted to Israel in any way, but we
Per
have
se. Mm.
we have um, often when the International Monetary Fund or World Bank gives loans, they have conditions. So if you look at, and I'm giving a completely different example here, but if you look at Mozambique has big loans from the IMF and from the World Bank, which are desperately needed, for example, after the massive hurricanes of 2020. But the IMF and World Bank, what they say is, we'll give you the money if you allow massive companies like Eni, Shell, BP, Total to extract gas. And as the Mozambican government, it's very difficult to say, we can't take these conditions because we really need the money. And so this is how, so in that way, the country is, indebted to fossil fuel companies. So it's when instead when the IMF or the World Bank or northern countries talk about reparations, they're very quick to talk about how bad they feel about colonialism, especially here in Europe. But what they could be doing instead of fossil fuels which are used for weapons, which are used in war, what they could be doing is providing funding for renewable energy and providing the technology for renewable energy without patents, and education for renewable energy. So, which can be community owned and not on a grid, and just work better for the African continent and for ex-colonial states. So like if you look at one of the things in Germany that, this is going back to Israel, the bring them home stickers. Yes, bring them home to Poland and to Germany where they initially came from. But because there's so much pressure put on southern countries to, to make, what's the word I'm looking for? To sort of compensate for the crimes of Germany, for colonizers, for companies and governments that still hold sovereign debt over African countries. It's very difficult for us to actually get out of that when we're still indebted. So and these countries don't want to cancel the sovereign debt because they want access to the fossil fuels. They want access to the coal and to access to the oil, which is only, devastating these countries further. So ultimately, I'm learning being here that colonization still works for the colonizer,
Absolutely.
and it's very difficult for them to give that up.
Ilham, unfortunately, we have run out of time. A very interesting article, and that person that has become a keyboard warrior attacking Palestinians and you and I regarding this discussion. All I can say to you is this didn't start on October the 7th. Get ahead of yourself. And let me just tell you also, don't think because you're white skinned, you're superior. Black lives matter, and white people the world over are where they are on the backs of black labor, black sweat, blood, and tears. So get over yourself. Ilham, lovely talking with you. Sorry that we had this bit of a spat, but I think it's added a bit of a spice to our discussion this morning. It just once again shows you the mentality of white supremacist superiority. But thank you once again. Go well, and salaam alaikum to you.
Thank you for having me. Wa alaikum salam.
19 minutes after 9 o'clock, we're moving along. News and views on Salam Media. And let's go for a quick short break. We'll be back in a minute or two and have lots more coming your way.